I'm going to talk to you about a different kind of LibreOffice database. We're going to talk about Firebird. So in this upcoming video, I'm going to show you how to download and install the Firebird database in server mode for LibreOffice Space. I'm going to show you how to install Flame Robin, which is a database manager for Firebird. And I'm going to show you how to download and configure an ODBC driver so you can connect to this Firebird database from LibreOffice Space, from Microsoft Excel. Enjoy. You have a number of ways of creating your database. So the traditional way we've used is HSQLDB, and you've got Firebase. These are databases that LibreOffice seems to be pushing. They seem to be, for some reason, pushing Firebase a little bit more. But there's also two ways you can use these databases. You can use them either embedded or as servers or split. Okay, now I recommend this method. The embedded method is where the database is locked in your ODB file. And what that means is the file is less portable among other systems. And in addition to that, you increase the possibility of having a corrupted database because the data apparently is not saved until you actually close your application. So what that means in practice is you could be putting loads of records into your database and something goes wrong, and then you run the risk of losing your records. Whereas if you have a server or a split database, depending, some split databases are not servers, we'll get into that, but if you've got a server or split database, every time you write a record it gets saved to your hard disk within the database. Now what we're going to look at is a Firebase database this time. My previous videos have dealt with HSQLDB. Now HSQLDB is a Java based database. And what I've found with that is, hey, it's good. I built some nice databases with it, and my publishing manager database is using this, the Java-based HSQLDB database, in a split methodology. But the one problem is that Business Program on my channel, it's about being able to build systems that can be used everywhere, but using, I guess, free or almost free software. And the one problem I have with HSQLDB being a Java-based database is that it doesn't seem to work with ODBC. And ODBC being Open Database Connectivity, meaning it's an interface, an in-between spot whereby you could get Excel or Python or Access or any other program, say Calc, to talk to ODBC, and then via ODBC you can talk to Firebase, or it should be HSQLDB, but I have been unable to get a free driver anyway that works with it. So the options we can have are Firebase or MySQL, and I've done quite a lot of stuff with MySQL as well, and I like it, but we're going to look at Firebase in this video. And what we're going to do is I'm going to build, and you can come along with me, we're going to build a task manager that's going to be 3 or 4 tables in Firebase using it in server mode. And with server mode, the advantage of Firebase is because it's written in C++, MySQL is also written in C++, because Firebase is written in C++, ODBC works with it, and I've been experimenting over the past week or so, and you can get all these other systems to talk to it. So if you come along with me, maybe you can experiment with Firebase too and see what you think. Let's get to it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to install Firebird, and then we're going to install Flame Robin, which is a database front end to manage Firebird, and then we're going to install ODBC. What that's going to mean is with this Firebird database, we should be able to communicate with it from LibreOffice Space, from LibreOffice Calc, from Microsoft Access, from Microsoft Excel, and possibly even from Python. So what we're going to do right now is we're just going to get it installed in this video. I might give you a quick demo of it working, and then in the next video we will build a database, most likely a task manager. Let's get it installed now. Download Firebird, and we get the Firebird, and what I'm going to do is, I'm on Windows 10, so if you're on Windows 10 or if you are on Windows 11, I guess Win64 is what you're going to want to go with. So I'm just going to click on Win64, and I'm just going to go straight off with the option at the top, which is Firebird 3. Here we go, it's going to download. And I'm just going to check, see, is it there? Show in folder. And here we have it, Firebird x64. Double click, choose English or whatever is your preferred language, accept the agreement, next. Now I've installed it on my other computer, which is why I'm doing it on the laptop right now, so I have a clean install. Everything is ticked, go with everything here, next. So runs Firebird in classic server mode, run Firebird in super server, that's what I'm going to do, and run as a service, absolutely you want to run it as a service. And I'm going to click next. Now, this is the important part. Firebird user management can become a little bit complex. At the moment, I've found that I need to use the sysdba account. So therefore, if you're setting up a password, the default password for Firebird is master key. If you're not worried about security, use master key. If you are worried about security, come up with your own password, but for crying out loud, don't lose that password. Okay, so what I'm going to experiment with in this instance is I'm going to come up with a password, and I'm just going to call it YouTube. And if you want to hack me, it ain't going to be YouTube after this demo. So the sysdba account is going to have a password of YouTube, lowercase. Next, install. And Firebird is now running on my machine. The next thing that we want is Flame Robin. So I'm just going to get a new tab and I'm going to type download Flame Robin. And that takes us to the Flame Robin site. Now, it says not secure. I'm not going to worry about that because on my other computer I've dealt with it and it's fine. I'm guessing because Flame Robin is free, they just couldn't be bothered to set up an HTTPS server. 3rd of May 2023, new Flame Robin snapshot is available with a few Firebird 4 fixes. That's the latest one that's here. So let's click on that and it takes us to this snapshot, assets. If you scroll down, you'll see contributors, and under it says assets. It's not very clear, but Flame Robin setup x64, which is what you want because that will be the 64-bit version, and Windows 10 and 11, etc. run on 64-bit. So let's download that now, and now I'm going to set up that. So show in folder, and Flame Robin setup, and it's given me a warning, but it's okay, it will be fine, it's not going to. Okay, I accept the agreement, next, 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 and next, install. So Flame Robin is installing, finish. When you install Flame Robin, you will get this configuration file not found. That's okay, that's normal, click OK. What we got to do now is create a database. So the database that's going to be created and possibly worked on in the next video is going to be called Task Manager. Create new database, and I'm going to call it Task Manager, and you've got to come up with a database path. Click on the treble ellipses, so I'm just going to put it under my data folder, create a folder, and I'm going to call it Firebird Databases, and I'm going to go in there and I'm going to come up with a name, and the name is going to be Task Manager. Open. We only have one user to start with, and that's the sysdba. So I'm going to type sysdba as the username, and the password, as specified earlier, is going to be YouTube. Firebird is unique in its user management method. It's got a lot more control than your normal databases, like HSQLDB, which is the default one that comes with base. Even MySQL. The default is that people don't have permissions. Now this is good if, for example, you wanted to create an HR database or something like that, because people don't have permissions to view objects on your database unless you explicitly give them permissions, okay? So it can be a bit of a pain, or it can be really useful. But if you want to treat this as a learning experience, if you can get on top of this, you will be doing well, and you'll have some good database chops. Now I'm going to hand-hold you through as much of this as possible over quite a few videos because I don't want to bore you on this video. So there's two things. You can explicitly give permissions to users on an individual basis, or you can create what's known as roles. So you could create something like HR manager as a role, and the HR manager could have access to certain tables and certain queries and certain operations such as insert or delete or whatever. Now, when you create a role, the role has to be assigned to the user, but in addition to that, for the user to avail of the role, they have to actually specify the role here on their login, basically. So a user then could have two different roles. And I mean, roles are useful because, and permissions are useful. So for example, even on your normal PC, it's best not to log in with admin privileges, even if you have admin privileges available to you, because if a virus gets on your PC, well then that virus has admin privileges. Similarly, If you just need the God powers for administration, but you don't need them for your day-to-day tasks, you could have a role giving you inverted commas God powers, but you just log in normally with your normal user role, so you can have various roles. So for example, in this role area, you could put in HR manager or whatever role you have created with its permissions. In this instance, I'm not assigning any role, we're just going to sysdba and the password of YouTube. So let's click create. And now we have a database called Task Manager with those roles. The next thing we're going to do now is get an ODBC driver, because we are creating an external Firebird database which is super powerful, much better than an embedded database. And you should be able to access this database from other PCs as well. Firebird ODBC driver, so I click on ODBC driver, and what I want is going to be the ODBC driver. I want the Windows 64-bit full install, and most likely that's what you're going to want as well if you're on Windows 10 or on Windows 11. Here we go. It's automatically downloading here. Show in folder. Here we go, Firebird ODBC. So welcome to the ODBC driver setup. Next. I accept the agreement. Next. 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 Install. Next. Finish. Okay, so now let's set up the ODBC driver. So what you got to do is, if you click next to the start button and you type ODBC. Now remember, we installed an ODBC 64-bit driver, so we don't want the 32-bit ODBC data sources, we want the 64-bit ODBC data sources. Then we go to System DSN and you click Add, and we're going to choose Firebase Interbase Driver because that's what we just downloaded and that's the one we want, and click Finish. Now, data source name, in this instance, I'm going to type Task Manager because that's the database, and we got to go to where the database is. So I said it's under Data, it's under Firebird Databases, and so we're pointing the ODBC driver to the database. And the database account I'm going to use in this instance to start off is sysdba, and the password is going to be YouTube. And I'm going to test the connection. Connection failed. Sysdba. Now, I must have typed the password incorrectly. The passwords are case sensitive, and you're going to find a lot of stuff with Firebird is case sensitive. Now, to make sure that all of your connections work without a hitch, tick all these three boxes: quoted identifiers, sensitive identifier, and auto-quote identifier. There we go, they're all ticked. That's your setup. Description, you don't have to, I just do. Connect to my task manager. Test connection, connection successful, OK. So you now have an ODBC connection set up. So what I'm going to talk about now is we're going to build the database in Firebird. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a task manager database, and we're going to do it together and learn together. So we're going to have three tables just in this simple database. It's going to have a project table, it's going to have a sub-project table, and it's going to have a task table. So this is our task manager application that we're going to create in Firebird. Let's look at the structure of it first. So what we're going to do is we're going to create table project. So it'll be table project, and it's going to have an ID field. Now, this ID field will be an auto number field. Auto number fields are very important because they make database creation simpler. All tables need, as a best practice, especially if you're going to do a decent database, all tables need an auto number field. Auto number is where, as you add a record to the table, the number of the ID increments without you having to write code to increment it. Years ago, I used to, being, I suppose, OCD or whatever, I used to write code to increment these, but it's just too much work and it slows down development time. So it'll be an auto number field, ID, and its data type will be integer, and it'll be a primary key. So that's the first column of the table, of the project table. And in addition to that, we're going to come up with a project name field and a project description field. So it'll be project name, we'll give it 20 characters or so. So varchar variable characters 20. And then the project description, or just description, whichever, that will be varchar 255, or do we need, 255, 255 characters will allow for that. So that's our project table. We're also going to want a sub-project table. This is because, for example, a project could be create a particular form, or in this instance, the project is create a task manager, so it's kind of self-referential. So create a task manager. A sub-project could be create a particular form within that task manager, and then tasks could be create the various different controls and the code that goes with them. So that's where the project, sub-project, and task comes from. So table sub-project, this again will have an ID, and it'll be an integer, auto number, and a primary key. And for the sub-project, we need to give it a name and a project ID. So name and project ID. Now the project ID, so the name will be, again, copying above here, varchar 20 for the sub-project name, varchar 20. In fact, varchar 20, maybe some more characters. The project ID, this project ID will be an integer, and what this is doing is it is tying into the ID of the project. That's the purpose of it. That's how you link the tables and know that you're talking about the same thing if you're in a sub-project of a given project. And then we're going to create table task. So again, we have an ID, and it's going to be a primary key, and it's going to be an auto number. Forgive my writing, I'm just sort of getting the ideas out here. So for the subtask, what we're going to want is a task name and the task details. So task name, I'll say varchar 25, and the task details, varchar and 255. So these are the initial tasks. Now there is one other table I might create, I'm not committing to it right here, and that would be table time log, because imagine that you're in a task and you get interrupted. So then you just got to stop that. You got to hit stop on your recording of the task. Because one reason I would come up for doing a task manager is if I was to build up my business and take bids on building projects for people, if I've got to do a bid in advance, I want to know roughly how much it's going to cost me in terms of time to do the project. And the only way to do that is have a history of how long it took me to build various forms, etc. And I record it in here. But if you get interrupted, you need to be able to hit stop, for example, on the timer, and then start. So I'll put in the table here, but I'm not guaranteeing whether I will have solved all the issues in making it happen in time for this video, because I want to get this video out. But the other table would be table time log. And sorry, one other item I got to mention is this task ID would tie into the sub-project ID. And so that's how they link together in a cascading manner. So table time log, it'll have its ID, it'll have its task ID. So you have the ID for this, you have the task ID, which is tying into the task. And in addition to that, we're going to need a start time and an end time. And I forgot to, as I get distracted here, this is going to be an integer. This is primary key, PK, auto number. And both of these fields here are going to be timestamp. So let's build that database right now. So at the start prompt, I'm just going to type Flame Robin. So here's Flame Robin, and we created our database task manager. So let's first of all create our project table. The way to understand this SQL and not become afraid of it is to have notes. So for example, I've got some notes here on creating a table. So let's just create a table right now. So what you got to do over Task Manager is right click and choose execute SQL statements. So yeah, I want to connect first. So now I'm connected. I've got my SQL statement here. The first table we want to create is table project. So this is roughly the syntax for a create table. So what you have, the thing about Flame Robin, and more to the point, a lot of SQL databases such as HSQLDB and Firebird as well, is that it's very case sensitive. So if I want to create a table called lowercase table using camel case, capital C, capital T, capital D, I have got to surround the table names in quotes. If I don't surround the table names in quotes, the SQL will work to create the table. However, what will also happen is everything will become uppercase. So if I want to have the tables look like this and not have them all be uppercase, which makes them harder to read if they're all uppercase, I surround my objects with double quotes. So for example, this ID field doesn't require double quotes because I've already made it uppercase, but there you go. So first name here is quoted and last name is quoted. So let's just type some create table SQL right now. So what I'm going to type is create table, and the table is going to be table project, TBL project, and the field names, as we've discussed earlier, first of all are going to be ID. So I'll just do uppercase ID. So it's ID, and you can see even I am looking at my notes. So it's ID integer, not null, and you need this to be a primary key. Okay, so that's the first field. Now we want project name, I think I said, wasn't it? So project name and project description. So I'm going to do quotes for project name because again I want it in camel case. So PROJECT project name, and I don't like having spaces in my field names because it means you've got to often put square brackets or something like that around them when you're calling them in SQL. So I don't like spaces. You could do project hyphen name, whatever, but I personally don't like spaces. So project name, and that's going to be varchar, and I'm making varchar 25. And project description, DESCRIPTION, and I want this to be quite long if necessary. Now what varchar does is it's a string, but it allows you, it's efficient on the database. So I've allowed 255 characters, but if I don't need to use them, it doesn't take up that space, basically. So varchar 255, close the brackets, and I'm going to put a semicolon there. So let's, so we're executing this particular SQL in the Flame Robin development environment. So let's execute it by clicking the play button, and we've got no red marks here, so that means it's worked. But the thing is, what can be funny about Flame Robin is Flame Robin treats everything as a transaction. So it's tested the SQL, but until you press this correction mark thing, it's not committed. So when you do this, you commit the transaction. So now the table will have been created. So if we, for example, go to Flame Robin and look under tables, we see we've got one table and it's table project that we've just created, and the table is there. But this is where Firebird can seem a little bit more complicated because you've got to do two separate things in order to have an auto number field. So the first thing you got to do is you got to create something called a sequence. Now again, you can have notes, and quick secret, I've created a LibreOffice Calc utility which does all this for you, which we'll get to later. But right now, let's just see what's going on behind the scenes. So what I would then do is I would just copy from my notes how to create a sequence. And I'm going to create put in some previous code. Now, let's have a look here. Create sequence, git, create table demo. I like my auto number fields to start at something like 1,000 or 10,000. There's a reason for that, and that's because numbers sort to the left, and 100001, 10002, 10003 looks a lot better than 1, 2, 3, 21, 99, 105. I like to have all the same amount of digits. It means numbers sort better and they're easier on the eyes. You create a sequence. The sequence has to have a meaningful name. So the table we've created is table project. So what I'm going to do is create GID_project. So that's for the project table. Start with, I don't think we're going to have that many projects, so I'll reduce, take 10 out and increment by 1. All I've done here really is I've gone to my notes and I've changed the table name. Look, you know, if I can do it, you can do it, basically, because my memory isn't always the best. So the sequence is going to go in under this generators area here on Flame Robin. You can see there's nothing there right now. Fingers crossed that this doesn't blow up on me. I'm going to hit play, and we've had no errors. I'm going to hit the commit transaction, and now you can see we've got a generator. So the next thing we got to do is we've got to create a trigger. Now, the trigger is what enables the auto number sequence to work. Now, so what we're going to do is it's table project. So I'm going to just change the name here, project. So the trigger name is going to be table project BI, and it's going to be for table project. Now, as I said, I've written a macro for this, so you won't have to do this, but it's useful to see how I go about it. So create trigger table project BI for table project. Before insert position, yada yada. And this is probably why it's useful to keep your ID field the same, because you've got less changes to make. Now we're working on this trigger has to trigger against gid project. So we've got gid project here. So you can see here, this is looking for gid create demo, but I'm going to put it against gid underscore project. So wherever you see gid demo, I just change it to gid project. Okay, so we've created the trigger. This is like doing math in real time on video. So let's see if it works. Have I made any mistake? Now there is only one thing that possibly can go wrong, and that this trigger is designed to be fired from my macro. So I may have to put in a few adjustments. And I think I'm probably I knew I was going to have to put in a few adjustments. We've got to roll back that transaction. I'm going to make an adjustment to the trigger. Okay, so what we've got to do to make this trigger work is we've got to create a terminator. So set term, and it's going to be the acute accent or this accent above the 6, and follow it with a semicolon. So we're changing the terminator. This is because we're creating the trigger within SQL, and when it comes across the normal terminators for SQL statements are semicolons, but because a trigger and stored procedures etc. have multiple statements inside them that terminate with semicolons, we have got to switch the terminator. Then we've got to reverse the process by putting the terminator there, set term, and reverse the process, which is going to be the semicolon there, followed by the circumflex. Now we hit run. And you can see it's worked this time. And we hit the correction mark to say it's good to go. As I said, I've got a utility to take all this hard work out from you. But you know, once you analyze this stuff, maybe you learn a few things. Firebird is more complicated in requiring this, but once you've automated it with some macros, which I've done, it makes it easier. So now let's look at the triggers within the Flame Robin interface. And we should see we have created a trigger called Table Project BI. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to create a table a different way. If I go to LibreOffice Base, so what's interesting to notice is when you're creating a new database in LibreOffice version 6, you only really had the option of an HSQLDB, but now in version 7 and onwards, they are pushing Firebird. Connect to an existing database, Firebird file, but I'm going to say ODBC because we've created the ODBC connection. Next, and I'm going to browse, and we're going to choose Task Manager, which is the ODBC connection we already created. So let's click OK on that, and click Next. And the username was sysdba initially, and password required, test connection, and the password is YouTube. And click OK. Connection established successfully. Next, and finish. I know I don't want to register the database because I'm testing things right now. Register the database is where it shows up in the list of LibreOffice databases. Finish. And let us find a place to put this database. I'll just stick it under data. I'm going to call it Firebird Task Manager. And we have table projects that we just created. Now, if we have a look at table project, hopefully the ID field should actually adjust automatically. Maybe not when I type it in, but behind the scenes it will. So the first project name is going to be Task Manager because it's self-referential. Our project is creating a Task Manager database, Task Manager. And the project description is create a Firebird Task Manager database. And if I click on the next cell, we've got a 0 appearing here, but it will have actually updated behind the scenes because now if I close this table and I go into it, you see the number 10,001 has appeared. So the ID field has generated automatically. There's a number of ways we can create a table. Let's go to the Create Table in Design View wizard. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to create our table sub-project. Although I want an ID field, you can't actually create the ID field here because it will still prompt you to create an ID field. So just watch this. So I'm just going to call it sub-project and varchar. Let's see what varchars it offers me. It just offers me varchar, so that's going to be interesting. And I'm going to type description, varchar, and project ID, which is the project ID that this is related to, ID, and that's going to be integer. Close it. Okay, now it's going to prompt me for the table name. So it's going to be table sub-project. No primary key. Should a primary key be created now? Yes. And you see it's created a primary key called ID. Now what this is not going to be set up as is an auto number. So we still have to do that. So let's just hit save on this and close it. So now if we look at table sub-project, we've got an ID field and a sub-project and a description. So we've created this table in LibreOffice Base. Now let's have a look at Flame Robin, which is connecting to the same server database. Click on Task Manager and right click and do refresh. We should have two tables appearing here. We've got the two tables. We've got table project and we've got table sub-project. But if we look at it, ID integer not null, but and it is a primary key, but it's not auto number. So what we've got to do now is create a generator again and a trigger. But we're going to try and do that from base this time. We're going to use the SQL tool within LibreOffice Base this time, just to mix it up a bit and make this tutorial a bit more useful, shall we say, to show that there's more than one way to get something done. You thought I was going to say something else, didn't you? No cats were harmed here. So YouTube. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is table sub-project. So if you go to Tools, SQL, this window here is what you want to use if you're writing any SQL, any active SQL, especially to a server database. You don't try and do it via queries, you do it here. So let's create our generator first, or our sequence first. Control C, copy that into here. So create sequence, git create table demo, GID, and it's going to be sub project. Start with 100,000. I'm going to go with that. So that's the only change we had to make to this, was to change the name of the sequence. So if I type execute and command successfully executed, and if we run over to Flame Robin and we refresh, you'll see now we've got git sub project, other than I haven't kept the proper naming convention, but never mind. Git sub project has got an underscore here and non-underscore there, but hey, but you know what I could do? I will keep the naming convention and I'll create another sequence, execute, command. Now if we go over to here, we should have another generator, refresh. So we got another generator, and I'm just going to delete this generator, drop. Yes, drop it. Please drop it, yes. And we now have kept the coding convention. So it's git sub-project. So now what I want to do is I'm going to try firing the trigger again. Well, let's just create a new trigger here first of all. So create trigger, table create, table sub-project. Now, I will have resources, including the macro to create these tables, available on my website. You can get there by typing in businessprogrammer.com/go/119. There's an email box there. Put your details into it, and any resources to help you with this will be emailed to you. And you know, you can unsubscribe at any time you want, but if you want to get notifications of new videos I'm creating, etc., stay on the list. Okay, so where am I? Git sub project, we're adjusting the trigger, and so create trigger, table sub project _bi, that's the trigger for table sub project. So create trigger, table sub project bi for table sub project. Okay, before this is a new ID, and we're using the sequence git underscore sub project. So anywhere I see git create table demo, I'm going to replace it with git sub project, So gid subproject, and this is where keeping the ID field the same, that is calling the ID field ID, makes your life easier. Let us see, do I need to make the same modification to the trigger when I'm firing it from this window here? Let's execute it. Command successfully executed. So that's the thing, when you're creating a trigger in a database admin package, you need to put in the extra terminators, because it needs to know that the difference between creating the trigger and running the trigger. But when you're sending it across the network from here, you don't. So you just have to figure out which situation works for yourself, but they are the situations. So now if we go to the triggers, we should have 2 triggers. So it only says 1 trigger here, but that's because I need to refresh the triggers. So if I refresh, now we have table project BI and table subproject BI. So let us go to table subproject, double click into it, and I'm going to say the subproject is create table project, because that's what we were doing. We were creating table project. Description can be put in later, but the project ID, now when you have an application, you would get the application to do this automatically, and that would be handled by the database. But there's only so much we can do in this particular demo. So let's just put in the project ID here for reference. So the project ID of the project is that, and when I go to the next record, you can see an ID has been put in automatically. When we put it in, it just puts a 0 there, but behind the scenes on your Firebird server, the correct ID has been put in. How do I know? Because when I close this table and open subproject again, you see the correct ID. It's 1001. And let's put in another subtask, create table sub project, and the project ID that it's referring to is the same one. So it is, because it's referring to project. This is like a lookup table, and really databases are like lookup tables. That's all they are. Close the table, open it up again, and you can see the ID field is automatically populating. Let's create table task. And so a task is going to have an ID, a task name, details, and a subproject. Let's create the table with SQL from LibreOffice Base. So we've created the table with SQL from Flame Robin. We've created the table using the table designer in the LibreOffice Base database. And now we're going to create a table using the SQL from LibreOffice Base. So create table TBL subproject, and what I need, of course, are quotes. So create table subproject ID primary key ID integer, not null. And then I need, what am I saying? I'm doing the table sorry, what am I doing? It's not subproject, table task ID primary key, not null. And then what I need is the task name and details. So task name, quotes again, varchar 25, and task details again 255. So 255 characters max. And to be quite honest, lots of things, be it Excel or Base or any kind of programming, my way of doing it is I do a sort of an 80-20 basis. There's lots of options of different field types, etc. For databases, I tend to stick to integer or long, the biggest integer number, double for floating for decimal point numbers, and varchar. You can get string, you can get tiny int or whatever, but most of the time with anything you're doing, 3 or 4 of the vast array of choices can be used consistently. Finally, what I want is I'm going to want a subproject because we're going to link this against subproject. So I'm going to do subproject ID, and that's going to be integer. And I'm going to close it off. Hopefully I haven't made a mistake. Execute, and I made a mistake. Yeah, because I forgot to do create table. So it's not create table task, it's create table task. And execute, and command successfully executed. So that's table task. And so if we do view refresh tables, you see table task now appears. You've always got to do refresh tables in LibreOffice Base in order to see stuff. And the same here, you've got your tables. It's showing 2 tables, but once we refresh, you've got table task appearing here as well. Again, the ID is an integer, not null, but it's not auto number. So again, I am going to create a sequence. So let's get our sequence, Control C, Control V, GID task, I'm going to call it, caps lock on, TASK, and in fact, out of interest, I'm going to run this also from LibreOffice Base, and 100,000, many tasks, 999,000. I'm going to put an extra 0 there. Tools, SQL, Control V, and I'm going to go for a bigger number here, another 0. So create sequence, GID task, GID underscore task, because that's the way we're rocking and rolling. Execute. Command successfully executed. I'm going to take for granted it's in the other place. And now I'm going to, in fact, I'm just going to work with this one again. I'm going to call this task, and for table task, caps lock off, for table task, and it is table task. And we're going to call this GID task. So I'm going to copy in GID task. In fact, we're going to copy in GID underscore task. You thought you got me there, didn't you? So let's do that for table task. New ID is on, GID underscore Control V. You know, if this sounds painful, it took me ages to figure this all out, because the documentation, you go have a look at the documentation for Firebird, and it's a bit scary. Scary for me anyway. So you can also see it can sometimes be easier to execute your SQL because you don't have to put in those extra terminators if you execute it from LibreOffice Base. So Tools, SQL, Control V, looks good, execute, and it's successfully executed. A subtask in this instance then, because here's our tasks. So this is where you'd have a form, and I'm not doing it in this particular one. I've got other videos on creating forms, and I will create a form for this in LibreOffice Base. But remember, the beauty of this is this will also work with Excel, it'll work with Calc, it'll probably most likely work with Python. So let us, in the next video, I will go further in this. So table task, let's create a task. So the task name is going to be create a generator, for example. And the details of the task will be create generator for YouTube video, which is what I'm doing. And the sub project ID for this, it'll be for create table project. That's the one I'm going to go with. Create generator for table project. This could easily be create water lawns for golf course, and one of them is the golf course or whatever. So now let's just call this up again. So yeah, so there we go. Create generator for table. So this is where my field size could perhaps have been bigger. So maybe in future we'll have to alter this table to make it longer. That will be in the new video as well. So let's look at what we've done here. We have installed a Firebird database. We've installed Flame Robin, a third-party database manager. We've installed ODBC and configured it for the database, and we've configured all the other elements. So we've configured Flame Robin to work with the database. We've also created a task manager database, and we've created some tables with triggers, and I've demonstrated to you that it connects quite seamlessly to LibreOffice Base.